Hey, welcome back to 1,000 Words. My name is Matt Addington, and I appreciate you coming back. Even though it's been a while since I've been here, I haven't had the time to put one together. Certainly been in contact with a lot of folks, but really looking forward to this episode with my friend Tom Opre, who is a filmmaker, been in the television and film industry for a number of years, working primarily in the outdoors industry. And I'm really excited to talk this week with Tom about a film that he's been putting together for the last few years called Killing the Shepherd, which is the story of wildlife and humanity and the relationship between the two over in Zambia. So again, just super excited to have Tom Opre with us here today. Tom is a filmmaker, been around the block certainly in television and film, especially in the outdoors industry is kind of where I got to know Tom through Professional Outdoor Media Association. So really appreciate you coming on today, Tom.
Hey, it's really great, Matt, to be here. So, it's good to have folks that understand how important it is to get the word out about conservation.
Right. And like I mentioned, Tom's got a film that's coming out that I'm super excited for him, and I'm super excited that the world will have a chance to see Killing the Shepherd. But let's rewind just a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background in the television and film industry, and just as a creator, turn back the clock a little bit and give us the speech on what your world looked like.
Oh, so who am I? Is that what you're asking? Where am I from? All that stuff. Well, I started out in underwater basket weaving. It's an incredible video.
You're really good at it.
Yeah, really good. So actually, I did do a lot of underwater stuff. I got out of college and moved to Florida, and I ended up working for the great Jordan Klein, underwater cinematographer. His son, a couple of years older than me. We got to be good friends. Jordan, his father, did all the underwater cinematography of Thunderball, James Bond movie, and he's got a Directors Guild of America Lifetime Achievement Award. So I got a chance to work with some cool guys like that, and actually got my first big producing gig working for his son. We did a Shark Week show, again, I'm dating myself, 94, I think. I was working on a film. I was doing one of the Iron Eagle movies in Arizona and Tucson, and Jordan called me up and he's like, "Hey, we got this cool thing for Discovery Channel. You want to do it? Got to come back to Florida." So, and I've been working on feature films and production, and so I was like, "Yeah, that's cool." So, we had 3 months to find all the sharks we could around Florida and the Bahamas because we didn't have a huge budget. And ended up being at the time it was the lead or premiere show of Shark Week back then, and it was about it's called The Great Shark Hunt. It was about man's how we're basically fucking up shark populations by the finning and overharvesting and all that. And it's still even a huger problem now. But yeah, so that was kind of my first foray into documentaries and TV and stuff. And from there, I started doing work for a lot of different companies in the outdoor recreation world. So I worked with Sea-Doo Watercraft for, 12 or 13 years doing all their stuff. And just kind of tried to stay true to my love for and passion for the outdoors. So obviously I'm a sportsman, love to hunt and fish. Travel a lot. Grew up with a father that was an outdoor writer, wrote for Outdoor Life and Film and Stream for 30 years. So, with that kind of background, you don't really have any alternative but to be a sportsman. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And I just, I've been directing since I was 27, worked on a lot of really cool productions. If you've seen any of the Trigicon commercials that are running right now, those are all mine that I directed. And done a lot of stuff for a lot of other companies in the outdoor space, but also automotive, done a lot of off-road stuff to snowmobiles, ATVs, done a lot of work for Warren, the winch company. So that's kind of been my forte, is in the pay-to-play film production world, not really the documentary world. And I did that for about, like I said, I started filming when I was 19 and started working in the business. And, we ended up having a television show from 2008 through 2015 on NBC Sports called Eye of a Hunter. And it was a first-person present tense show about conservation and the hunter's role of that. And we shot it all over the world. And it was actually the highest rated outdoor TV show in the world on NBC Sports. And then a lion got shot in Zimbabwe that somebody had nicknamed Cecil. And for some reason, everybody got all up in a roar of this thing. And next thing I know, we were no longer, the next year, we didn't get our contracts. And we didn't have anything to do with it. That was just the byproduct of the whole thing. And so, I've looked at a lot of the things that are going on in our world. And after 30 years of being a gun for hire in the film business, I said, you know what, I want to give something back. I want to do something more interesting. So a couple of years ago, myself and a bunch of wildlife photographers and other filmmakers got together and we formed a nonprofit called the Shepherds of Wildlife Society. And we see a huge disconnect in our modern society. Most people don't even know where their food comes from. And so we decided that we would all donate our content, incredible photography. Denver Bryan's, and if you guys ever look him up, Google him someday and look at his library of photography. I mean, one of the best wildlife photographers in the world. And so these guys we're all just taking this material and we're creating some educational stuff that we can take to folks that don't really understand what's going on in the real world. Because a lot of folks make decisions every day, and those decisions have downstream effects, and quite often those decisions will have a negative effect on wildlife and our natural resources around the world, and especially our forest habitats. So the reality there is we're trying to educate them, and our mission is to reconnect modern society with nature. So with that, I'm a filmmaker, so I'm decided to make mainstream documentaries again, and that's where we're at today.
Right. And it's cool that ultimately your passions have intersected, and you've found yourself now being able to, pursue this, this film life where it's not, like you said, a gun for hire per se, but it's a message. It's a little deeper than just making things that look pretty that allow people to sell stuff, which I get caught up in as well, where it's like, you get paid to go do stuff that ultimately is about the consumerism, and to have a story that's a little bigger. In this case with Killing the Shepherd, bigger than any one of these individual things. And I think I was lucky enough to see a screening of the film and just love it. And I want to talk about it here extensively today, as you're trying to, it's been in multiple film festivals, and it's kind of gaining this groundswell.
30 film festivals.
30 film festivals.
Now I haven't gotten into the Sundances.
Yeah, gaining a ton of groundswell for this, coming out. You're hoping sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas. But I thought one of the things that set the stage perfectly for it is in the intro, to the film, you talked about how wildlife and humans have the relationship changed, and which ultimately, like you said, changed biodiversity, on planet Earth. And the direction that it's going is scary as a person that's as an outdoorsman. And ultimately Killing the Shepherd, the whole thing, and really Shepherds of the Shepherds of the Wildlife organization, is to try to maybe not individually turn the tables, but ultimately shed some light on this so that people realize kind of what happened with that relationship over the course of time.
Yeah, tell you, Matt, most people are in our Western world. I mean, when they get up in the morning, they flip a switch, they expect the lights to come on, right? Mm-hmm. The next thing is they walk in the bathroom, flush the toilet outside out of mind. They don't want to deal with it, Mm-hmm. And then the next decision, is it a chai latte or caramel macchiato? Well, 2/3 or more of the world does not live that way. Yet we make decisions in our modern Western world that have adverse effects not only on these other cultures, these other societies, but also have really adverse effects on wildlife. And so really this film, Killing the Shepherd, is what is Killing the Shepherd? People ask me all the time, why'd you come up with this name? And I'm like, well, that's great, because what we have these people in a remote, rural village, this indigenous community in Zambia, led by a woman chief, which is very rare, but there's a history of it within this community. And literally these people were living in absolute poverty, and they were subsistence farmers. They're trying to grow corn, which is from North America, not Africa. It needs a lot of water, needs a lot of nutrients in the soil. Well, the soils are substandard. Water and rain patterns are changing because of, some people say it's global warming. Other people just say it's just not meant to grow there very easily. And so these people, they're also competing with all kinds of other natural issues with trying to raise their food. Whether it be insects, army ants, or it be, we talked about drought, but it could be baboons. Baboons love corn. A lot of animals do. So there's this conflict that goes on. And so you have these people that are trying to survive. Well, they're literally, what they ended up doing is eradicating and locally causing certain species of wildlife. I'm talking, antelope species, rhino. I mean, this area had rhino, it had elephant, it had lots of Cape buffalo and everything else. And back in the 80s and the early 90s, and then through badness, through some series of mismanagement and the wrong people that are in place, and poaching took over, and these people literally eradicated probably between 80 and 90% of the wildlife in an area that's the size of the state of Delaware. Yeah. So what really they are is the Soli people. That's the tribal there. This is the kingdom of Shekabeta, which is one of the four smaller parts of the overall tribe. And these people are the shepherds of their lands. These are the people that have to see some sort of benefit for protecting the wildlife or protecting the forest or protecting the waterways. And without them seeing a benefit, they're not going to take care of it. So they're the shepherds. We have this Western world that's very ignorant, doesn't understand what's going on. And one of the benefits that these people realize that's a huge amount of cash in a very remote area is safari, recreational tourist hunting. So the money it's generated by a half dozen hunters in 1 year is enough money to sustain this entire community and the economics of it, without anything else. And the story is about these people being the shepherds of their land, and the fact that we all in the Western society, Western modern world, may be very well killing them if we don't allow that. Matter of fact, right now, today, here in July of 2021, in the U.S. Congress, there's an appropriations bill where the Democrats have inserted language from the Cecil Act, which is basically to eliminate the importation of any animal parts of the Big Five from Africa. Well, you do that, you basically told every one of these people on the ground that are responsible for taking care of this resource that it's worth nothing to them, because nobody's going to pay $80,000 or $100,000 to hunt an elephant or a lion, and pay that money into that community and to the people that are running the operation, the safari industry. Then they're just going to kill it, because why have the same? It's a conflict. So that's the whole idea behind the name of the film, Killing the Shepherd.
Yeah. And it's such a misnomer. What you just said right there about, the safari hunting, and even the impressions that a lot of people in the United States have about is it, that you can go and, pay $100,000 and kill a lion, and who would want to kill a lion and all of this, but people don't see the other side that, like you said, 5 or 6 people could go and basically provide income for an entire kingdom like the Shikabetas, in one season, which, take it or leave it. There's a give and take with this that, is really going to be missed out on if that bill does indeed pass. Yeah. The other thing, you mentioned it and that's the poaching thing. And the first image we're going to bring up, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the Norton family, and they came in, and you're ultimately helping to tell their story, because they had the vision for this and the relationship with the poachers. And the poachers, you mentioned it, I think in a call that we did the other day, it's thin ice there too, because those guys they're doing it to ultimately, provide for their families, to raise money, 1, to feed their families, and 2, to ultimately be able to sell, meat and animal parts to make money. So there's a real, like I said, thin ice, and kind of you can see both sides of it. But tell us about the Nortons and about how they came in with this vision of ultimately how this whole thing has taken shape.
Yeah, so the Nortons, the Norton family is made up basically. You've got Roland Norton, the father, and then Alistair Norton, the son. Roland's in his late 60s. Alistair's in his early 40s. Roland has worked in the import-export business for a long time, which has nothing to do with the safari industry. But he's been a professional hunter for a long time, and he actually spent some time in the Luano back in the late 1980s, I think 88 or 89. And, back when there was lots of wildlife and a great variety of wildlife, they enacted a bunch of wildlife national parks and built refuges and hunting concession areas as buffers to the national parks to protect them. And so his father was part of getting and putting these things out and establishing them when he worked for National Parks and Wildlife as a young man, after World War II. And then, of course, Roland grew up around this and grew up with that idea of conservation and sustainability and managing things, which is a European thing. It's not an African thing, and mindset wise. And so he ended up doing that. And of course, once he saw what had happened, he'd always had a dream to have a hunting concession in Zambia. Now, his son Alistair has one north of there, about 5 hours up on the Luongo River system on the southern part of the valley. And so, this is something that, that he was interested in. And Alistair has a 10, 12-year-old son who's interested in being involved in the business his dad does. And so you've got 3 generations here that are very interested in wildlife conservation, habitat stewardship, and utilizing hunting as a way to pay for it. So they looked at it and they were like, wow, this is an interesting thing. Unfortunately, there's no wildlife there. I mean, originally, Chief Shekabeta, in her infinite wisdom, it's been 2 decades since there's been illegal hunting out there. And she just, her people were starving to death.
Right,
the UN wasn't there. There was no NGOs. The government doesn't have the ability to help these people. So she reached out to Roland, actually came to his office in downtown Lusaka, knocked on the door and says, I want to talk to you. We have a problem and I need your help. And of course, he's like, well, yeah, I'll come look at it, but I don't know what I can do for you. Right. And when he came out there and saw what was going on, and this area had no hunting going on. There was no legal quota from National Parks and Wildlife.
So you said the animals had disappeared, right? I mean,
animals don't disappear over there. Maybe into somebody's belly. But, and just kind of touch upon that a little bit. You've got 2 types of poaching. You've got subsistence poaching. That's the farmer whose crop fails, or he throws a few snares out behind the house to add some meat to the pot. And that's within reason. That's historically what's gone on for a long time. And it's sustainable usually, unless you got a ton of people there, it's pretty sustainable. The real problem are the people that decide and get that taste for, making money off of selling the wildlife. And of course, you can't do that here in North America because of the Lacey Act. But these people have figured out, and without any supervision and nobody protecting this area, I mean, entire villages were created of nothing but poachers, and they weren't in an area, they weren't growing anything, they weren't fishing. All they were doing is in an area that was adjacent to where there was lots of wildlife, and they were killing, drying, and shipping back to the city and making bank. And again, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry in Africa. And it's, if you live in the city and you want to eat wild game meat, I mean, it's considered not a delicacy, but kind of a right. To be able to have game meat, bush meat.
Well, so the first image that I was going to pull up is the shot of Alistair. We don't want to give away, obviously, the whole story of the film. We'll just try to touch on some pieces, but a really, really powerful image here. So Alistair's here in front of a whole stack of guns and the snares. That's pretty overwhelming. Talk a little bit about the role that that they've played in establishing just the management of poaching. And really, it's an image that's powerful in that you can see just a small snapshot of what's being done out in the bush.
Yeah. So the poaching that's going on is obviously not sustainable. I mean, they're literally causing certain species and animals to become extinct locally. And because of that, the only way, and it's literally, there's not supervision. There's no enforcement. There's no game wardens there. Yep. I mean, when they first got there, I think there was 6 guys that were community game scouts in the entire 1.2 million acres. So, I mean, and these guys didn't have kit. They didn't have much for guns. They didn't even get paid sometimes for a year. What the Nortons did is they literally enlisted the aid of a bunch of community scouts. Most of these people were poachers. That they said, hey, if you don't turn in your stuff, your snares, your guns, whatever you're using, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to go to prison. And so a bunch of the game scouts that were poachers went ahead and took the training and became, worked on the anti-poaching teams as game scouts. And the first couple of years, they confiscated somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7,000 wire snares out of the bush. And so they also confiscated, when they apprehend these guys in the bush, they have firearms, and it's not like your model 870 Remington, right, or model 700 or something like that. These guys actually have people making these homemade muzzle loaders and shotguns. And the muzzle, they make their own black powder with certain kind of charcoal and, fertilizer stuff and all that stuff. But these guns, they'll sit around the water holes and they're pretty effective with them. Out to 20, 30 yards. But they're killing kudu with these things. Yeah. They're killing hippos. They're killing anything they can that they can get close enough to, that they can get a projectile into the vitals of that animal. So they've collected, at that point in time, the first couple of years, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about, 50 guns, 75 guns that they had apprehended from folks. And they also offer a program where if you turn your gun in, they'll give you 1,000 kwacha, which is about, when we were filming it was about 10-to-1 exchange rate. Now it's about 20-to-1. So about $100 originally, now $50, but US dollars don't mean anything over there. It's all in kwacha. So that's what that image represents, is really the first couple of years of and this is not a, hey, we're going to go walk through the woods and have a great time and pick snares up. Mm-hmm. This is a war. Yeah. This is a shooting war. It's a bush war. Well, and it's dangerous.
Yeah. The impressions that I got, and I think the really positive to this is ultimately, it's either going to be hard time or hard education, if you want to look at it that way, because the number of poachers that are realizing that, hey, if I turn my stuff in and just get on the other side, I can still make money. Ultimately going to help the wildlife. So it seems like the poachers, though some of them are being apprehended and going to prison, some of them are coming over to the good side, if you will. And ultimately, that's one of the things, among a couple other things that we'll mention with the fish farming and some schools and medicine, that are really transforming the village, would you say?
Yeah, and it's the local guys that are what we call our community scouts. They're not the guys that are running the big poaching rings. And these poaching rings are highly well-organized, militaristic type gangs. And they're all based, in outside villages. They'll shoot you before they'll say hi. They'll shoot you before they allow you to arrest them. Yeah. So the game scouts, quite often, there is shooting that goes on there. And there are people that are dying in the bush. I mean, it is a very dangerous deal. Those people are not your community folks. Right. These gang bangers. I mean, they're coming from outside of the area. Their whole job is to kill, dry, and ship as quick as they can, as much as they can. That's all they care, because they work for other people within the gang, the hierarchy of the gangs. Yep.
Talk about without giving away too much, but how the Norton's vision started out with, really wildlife in mind, and bringing back, being able to have sustainable hunting and stuff again. But it has transformed these villages. It's brought people back around. It's provided opportunity through schools and medical help and food. How their vision has maybe taken on even a bigger responsibility than what it seemed like it might start out as.
Yeah, Matt, when they first got on the ground, which would have been the latter part of 2015, late 2015, they were going around the villages and looking around at things, and there were children laying on the ground starving to death. And so they had made some promises to do some infrastructure, but they put all those promises on the backside after communicating with an approval of the chief and the community. They literally started buying bags of mealie meal and trucking in tons of food to start feeding these people. But their number one objective was, in order for the wildlife to come back, was to stop getting people using the wildlife. So they went ahead and invested in a fish farm. It's six tanks. They're 30,000 gallons each above ground. And it's a fully controlled ecosystem where, if you have all the necessary things you need as far as constant power and clean water to work with and everything else, you can literally grow a huge amount of fish in 6 months' time. So their idea there was to go ahead and find a way to supplant the protein source of wildlife by using the fish. And so they've been able to do that. But you got to remember, you got to put this in perspective. These people aren't just hungry. These people are dealing with all kinds of issues. I mean, disease. I mean, this is a tsetse fly area, so you've got sleeping sickness. We've got HIV. It affects about 10% of the population. We've got malaria, huge problem all through there. And then probably one of the biggest problems I saw over the 3.5 years I was working there is alcoholism. I mean, these people, 6 kwacha and you can get a bottle of Gentleman's Cane spirits. It's about this big. Yeah. And 6 kwacha at 20 some dollar, or kwacha to the dollar. These guys are 25, 50 cents, and you're getting 2 or 3 bottles of this stuff. And some of these guys make their own hooch, their own beer and stuff, and they start drinking at 6 a.m. They got nothing else going on. Yep. So what they've been able to do by starting the development that they've done, which is very different than what you would do as a hunting safari company. but they've been able to create infrastructure, and with that, then an economy. So now they have between 150 and 200 people in the community working for them each year. And so with that, that's opened up opportunities for like some of the women, because of the alcohol problem, that leads to abuse. It leads to other things. A lot of the gals, the wives would come to Roland and say, hey, don't give my husband his salaries pay, because he's going to go spend it all on booze, and prostitution is a problem there too. And so, it's so bad that for food stability that, if you got a 13-year-old daughter and you got 8 or 9 kids, guess what? She's fair game. You can sell her for enough 30 bags of maize, which will feed your family for the year. Yeah. And so, what these wives, they're dealing with, Roland had an idea that he started a soft loan program. Mm-hmm. So these gals, he would go ahead and give them 0 interest, short-term loans, 3 to 6 months returns, and they could use that money to start their own businesses. And what I've seen is just this huge upswell of little businesses that have started all over the place around these communities. And these women are starting little mercantile stores. They're selling cellular chips, so people can have airtime and stuff. But they started businesses so that they can control the money flow that's coming in and out of their community locally there in their family.
Yeah. That's ultimately my involvement up in Kenya was similar in the fact that you feel like you're going to go there and I'm going to make a difference and I'm going to give this and I'm going to do that. But really the best part, the best thing that you can do for these folks is to educate and to enable them to build their own sustainability. And whether it be through a fish farm, taking the fish then, and building it from there, ultimately, kind of like teaching somebody to fish instead of giving them the fish. But that's really really the way it is with these folks. And how, as you went over there ultimately to shoot the film and to kind of tell the story, how would you say personally your 3 to 4 years over there impacted you personally and what you saw and witnessed?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first went over there, I took photographer Tony Bynum with me, and we spent, 12 days or something like that, cruising around, looking at everything. And short of getting stung by a scorpion in the middle of the night in my tent, it was pretty uneventful. But, I had been told this whole story about what was going on and the problems. The Nortons have been very, very forthright and open with me. Literally showing me ledgers, how much money, who's getting hired, what's going on, where every dime is going. But when I got there, you could see some of the issues. There were still people pounding corn, to make, with sticks in a bowl. Now there's hammer mills, which is, they're gas powered, that literally cleans and shells the corn and grinds it. And they're strategically placed all throughout the concession. The first trip, I was at an area where they had a concrete, literally a bunch of concrete blocks laying around and a concrete slab, and it was next to a well with one of those hand wells that you got to push the levers and push down the lever to make the water to come out. And there was a little school right by that. It was an open air school. Just thatched roof and just posts and dirt on the ground. And the kids, there was 30 kids inside this thing about the size of 1-car garage. And they were learning school and getting their education. And so I asked some questions about it, shot some video, and it turned out, the teacher is not really a teacher, just one of the elders that actually had an education that could help the kids. Doesn't get paid or anything like that. And so when I got back after the first trip in 2017, my father-in-law was at the house visiting my wife and the kids, the grandkids. And, he had started a nonprofit, maybe, I think it's probably 10, 12 years ago, called Africans Children's Schools. And he'd been out in hunting and doing around Africa. And he had this epiphany that, maybe I need to help these people and build some schools. And so the long and the short of it, he saw the video and I showed him what was going on. And he's like, well, hey, wait a minute. So within a week or the next day, we were on a WhatsApp call with the Nortons. And within a week, his nonprofit sent money, the half the money to build 3 schools and get everything started. And since then, I think we're now at 5 classroom blocks, uniforms for all the kids, teacher salaries, and books, desks, all that stuff. Yeah. So, but my point to answer your question though is that I mean, I didn't envision that by me showing up and showing a little bit of video that's not even a done film, that all of a sudden all these things would start happening. So yeah, it's been extremely rewarding. I mean,
yeah, it's really, I felt the same with my involvement over there. You just kind of, you wonder what, you just try to have a little foresight to see what 5 years, 10 years, 25 years looks like, not only for a whole village of people, but for individual, young kids. Education is power. We really take that for granted here because it's just something you do. You go to school and you graduate and you do the next thing, and we take for really take for granted the power that education is. And for those kids in that area, same being true for the area that I've been up in Kenya, where you think about their whole life, they've got a lifetime in front of them of just shepherding around a couple goats, or digging in the ground and trying to grow some corn. Ultimately, education is opportunity for them, and it's power, which is a great reminder for us coming back here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the day where these young kids that have gone to school for the first time because of the schools that, and again, remember, this isn't about giving people things. This is about empowering them. It's kind of like giving them the help, a helping hand up the first couple of rungs of the ladder to get out of that absolute impoverishment that they were in prior to the Norton showing up. And so, and again, as you mentioned earlier, it's like you don't give them fish, you teach them how to catch fish, and you do it sustainably. It is so intricate, the economic model that's going on here, because most of these people are farmers. And so but they don't have vehicles. So if they actually have a crop, in certain parts of the area actually usually have pretty consistent rain, so they have decent corn crops, but they have no way of getting their surplus out. So the Nortons, Roland put together a program. He would literally guarantee he would purchase at market price any surplus. Then he would transport it down into the lower areas of Lowana where they don't get consistent water and rain, and he would sell it at cost. Usually it's bartering back and forth.
Right.
But what he did with the lowland people who are adjacent to the rivers is that he went ahead and sold them fertilizer and vegetable seeds, and they could actually irrigate their own vegetable gardens because they're adjacent to the river, even during the hot, dry season. So that allowed them to grow excess crops, vegetables, and he turned around and took those to the highland farmers that had the good maize crops. And so, and he's built this up. And of course, they're going to get to the point where, they're going to end up having their own vehicles. Transportation is a huge problem. The Nortons take around a nurse every month to all the outlying villages so they can inoculate the kids and get them their vaccinations and check on their health and all that stuff. Because there was only 2 medical clinics in 1.2 million acres. It'd be like only 2 doctors' offices in all of Delaware. Wow. Now there's 3. They built one a couple of years ago. But still, I mean, to go and, they're adjacent to population centers. But if you live in an outlying village, you might be 40, 50, 60, 80 kilometer walk to get there. And so what often is that, Mikasa has vehicles going back to the fish farm, going to the safari camp. So they pretty well are covering the road system there fairly frequently. And they let people jump on. And so there's always a transportation thing going on. If anybody gets really sick, especially if it's someone they know through game scouts or through the community leadership, the community resource boards, they'll run them into the hospital. There's a hospital, not too far away from the area. And if it's really bad, they'll run them into Lusaka, which can be anywhere from a 4 to 6 hour drive. Yeah.
As I watch the film and as I think about it, and you and I have talked about it, like it started out as this wildlife thing, but it's for the Nortons, and really it's turned into so much more. It's a story of humanity. And I think ultimately that's what Killing the Shepherd, will be, is this story of humanity being restored in its relationship with the wildlife. That's what I loved about the story, that it just became so much more than, hey, we're going to bring some wildlife back and people are going to be able to hunt again. It really was kind of the restoration of a whole group of people.
Yeah, no, originally my original creative treatment for the film was just to tell the story of the Soli, of the Kingdom of Shekabeta, not allow any white people to be in the film except for in the background, out of focus, where you don't recognize them, and just let these people tell their story. And because I was very adverse to having my film feel like it was a colonial piece, where the colonial masters are doing this and all, really that just harkens back to a very racist time period in our society. And so what I saw, and as it developed and we filmed all this, and I've got a good friend, David Chancellor, he's a photographer from the UK. He shoots for National Geographic all the time. And he's not a hunter or sportsman, but he totally gets the whole process of sustainability and value. And he's like, Tom, you saw one of the first cuts of the film. He's like, where are the Nortons? And I said, I'm trying to put them in the movie. And I'm like, okay. So I put him in the movie, and about a week later, I sent just, okay, we're going in the right direction now.
Nice.
It's a story about these different cultures, and really the Nortons, they're second and third generation white Zambians, but they're as much Zambians as the Soli people.
Yeah.
And they've literally, through the whole evolution of this film, they're part of the tribe. They're part of this community.
Right.
And they have a long-term 20, 25-year leases on the property, of 99-year leases under the fish farm and under the safari camp. And it's a great economic model that, even if they were able to get a landline of electricity in there to their fish farm, they could put in another 100 farms and it could turn into a multi-million-dollar profitable fish farm. Right now, it's breaking even, and if they have any profit, they put the fish in the river to restock the river, because the river had been raped, with small net sizes out there, and they literally killed off every kind of fish you could think of, including all the young juvenile fish which hadn't reached maturity, an age that they could actually reproduce. So the river was almost completely devoid of fish.
Yeah, the film, because of all those things you just said, there's not an obvious conclusion. Here's the end. Everything is set. It truly will continue to evolve this story, which is awesome. I'm really excited for people to be able to see, what has transpired in the 4 years prior to right now. But see this, understand the story, be captured by it, and then ultimately take it forward and see where it goes. How can people get involved and all those things? Talk to me a little bit about the release. Where are we going to be able to see this? I know it's not all set in stone. And then ultimately, to answer that question, maybe how are people going to potentially be able to get involved if they are captured by this?
It's really the whole purpose of this film is to educate people. It's like, hey, here's the reality on the ground. So when you make decisions, think about what you're doing. What goes on. The film, as you said, it's not a wildlife film. It's not a film about hunting. It's a film about people. It's about basic human rights. Are the people of Shekabeta going to see a return on their hard work as wildlife conservationists? And conservation is the wise use of a natural resource. Look it up in Webster's. It's not preservation, which is the opposite. Hands off, don't touch, let Mother Nature figure it out. Mother Nature hasn't figured it out and never is going to figure it out. But these people, they're only going to take care of that natural resource if they see a benefit. And they're responsible for it. So the film itself, we're going through the film festival circuit. We've had 30 festivals pick up the film. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to distribute it. COVID has made a mess out of everything. Like everybody's life, it's made a mess out of ours. So we're looking at trying to do a limited theatrical release towards the end of the year, or maybe the very first of 2022. And then we'll do a digital cinema release on our website, shepherdsofwildlife.org. But if you go to Shepherds of Wildlife, our Instagram or Facebook pages, there are always going to be updates on what's going on and how things are coming. If people want to see a trailer, you can just Google it on YouTube or on Vimeo. They use Vimeo for a lot of stuff, so you can find the trailer there. I'm sure you'll probably put a link in your on your stuff. So and that's really the idea behind this. And then our goal is to educate you, but we also want to inspire you. We want you to say, hey, my goal is I have to do those things. I need to inspire you because we need to make change. There has to be change. We have to change people's mindsets about how we truly manage our wild places. And it's not a hands-off approach because there's 7.5, 8 billion humans on the planet. There isn't a square foot of this planet that we don't have some sort of impact. Whether you go to the highest point of the Earth, which is Mount Everest, where there's trash and used oxygen bottles. Heck, there's over 100 dead bodies up there right now. You go to the lowest point of the Earth, Marianas Trench, and in South Pacific. And I've always said that with the whole Fukushima nuclear reactor tsunami deal, that there had to be some bad stuff down there. And sure enough, National Geographic funded a study, and they sampled the biologic creatures down there, and they determined that they've been exposed to greater and worse pollutants in the most polluted rivers in China today. Yeah, I hope that we can educate you. I hope we can inspire you to be a part of what we're doing for the Shepherds of Wildlife, and we're working on putting together a whole infrastructure to create an environment for you to participate, to be a part of what we're doing, to support it, and to actively participate in it. And then, hopefully at the end of the day, I'll entertain you on top of it, so that you'll have something, you feel like you got something for your few bucks you paid to watch the movie, or whatever we happen to have going on.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about it, and even more so appreciate the efforts that you've put forward to shed light on these issues. We live in this world where, like you said right at the beginning, we wake up in the morning and we flush the toilet, and then we're talking what latte to get, and life is pretty easy here. And ultimately, if you can step back from it and take a 30,000 foot view, we all have a responsibility at some level to take better care of the place that we've been, charged to care for. And I think, Shepherds of the Wildlife is doing that. It's been fun to talk to you about upcoming projects and visions that you've got for other corners of the world where things are happening that aren't quite dialed in the way they should be, and how can we go and shed light on it and tell the story, and ultimately help with the big picture of that. So I appreciate you taking the time. I would love to circle back again to after the film comes out and just let this story evolve and see, what happens both in Zambia and in places around the world.
Yeah, no, and Matt, thanks for giving us an opportunity to work on your platform, and just tell people to go to shepherdsofwildlife.org, and you can reach out to us and shoot me a message, and we'll definitely stay in touch with you.
For sure. And we'll put all of the links, social media, website, all of those things will be in the show notes. They will have popped up on the screen here too, but we'll certainly keep you in touch with anybody that's interested in finding out more. But again, appreciate the time.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us for another episode of 1,000 Words. Appreciate Tom and the efforts that he's put in to help tell the story of conservation and the relationship between humans and wildlife and our responsibility here. Be sure to check out all the links that we've put in the show notes, as well as listed here on the screen, to hear more of the story of Killing the Shepherd, to be updated on its release, and ultimately how you might even be able to be involved. So until next time, hit the subscribe button, whether it be here on YouTube or if you're listening on your podcast platform. Appreciate the effort, and we'll see you next time.